The council chamber on Threx Prime was cold and silent. It always was. The walls were made of black stone that swallowed light, and the air smelled like metal and old dust. This was the place where the Galactic Dominion decided which species would live free and which would serve. For 11,000 years, no one had questioned the decisions made in this room. Grand Arbiter Vorath Kessin stood at the center of the chamber. He was tall, even by the standards of his insectoid species. His body was covered in dark armor-like skin, and his 4 black eyes moved slowly across the holographic star map floating before him. Each glowing dot on the map was a world. Each world had a number, and each number had a fate already written. "Next," Vorath said. His voice was deep and carried no warmth. A small figure hurried forward. Scribe Leon was a 4-armed alchemist, barely half the height of Vorath. Her species, the Miri, had been conquered long ago. Now they served as record keepers. Leon held a data tablet in 2 of her hands and kept the other 2 pressed nervously against her chest. "Species 4217, she said, her voice thin and careful. "Located in the outer rim. A planet called Earth. The local species calls themselves humans." Vorath did not look at her. "Classification?" "Class 2. Early technology. The last survey was conducted 214 years ago. At that time, they had basic nuclear capability and no space travel beyond their own moon." Vorath waved one of his long arms. "Standard harvest. Assign a fleet." Leon hesitated. Her fingers tightened on the tablet. "Grand Arbiter, there is something unusual in the file." "Unusual?" "The electromagnetic readings from their system have changed significantly since the last scan. The energy output is far beyond what a Class 2 civilization should produce. It is possible that the data is outdated and they have advanced further than we, Scribe." Vorath finally looked at her. His 4 eyes were like pits of nothing. "I have overseen the harvest of 300 species. Every single one of them believed they were special. Every single one of them was wrong. Assigned a fleet." Leon lowered her head. "Yes, Grand Arbiter." She entered the order into the system. 10,000 warships. A full harvester fleet, commanded by Fleet Commander Draxus Moore. It would arrive at the human system in 40 standard rotations. The operation was expected to last less than 3. It was routine. Completely routine. 6,000 light years away, on a small blue planet circling an ordinary yellow star, the routine was about to end forever. Deep beneath the Himalayan mountains, in a facility that no satellite could see and no signal could reach, a room full of screens flickered with alien text. This was the listening post of the Void Wardens, Earth's most secret military branch. For 60 years, they had been intercepting, recording, and decoding every transmission the Galactic Dominion sent across the stars. The Dominion did not know they existed. The Dominion did not know that humanity had been watching. Dr. Eamon Halil sat in front of the largest screen. He was a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes that had spent too many years reading alien languages. His team of 12 analysts worked around him in silence. They had learned long ago that when Dr. Halil went quiet, something important was happening. He read the intercepted transmission 3 times. Then he read it a 4th time, just to be sure. "Get me Admiral Drake," he said softly. 20 minutes later, Admiral Soren Drake walked into the room. He was not a large man, but he filled every space he entered. His face was hard, lined with scars from battles that no civilian would ever know about. His gray eyes were calm in a way that made other people nervous. He had commanded the Void Wardens for 15 years, and in that time, he had turned Earth's secret fleet into the most advanced military force in this part of the galaxy. He had been waiting for this day. Dr. Halil put the translated message on the main screen. It was a Dominion deployment order. A harvester fleet of 10,000 warships had been assigned to the Sol system. Their mission was conquest. Their expectation was zero resistance. The room was quiet for a long time. 10,000 ships, one of the analysts whispered. Admiral Drake read the message slowly. He read the fleet composition, the commander's name, the estimated arrival time, and the tactical approach. Then he did something that no one in the room expected. He smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had spent his entire career building something and had finally been given a reason to use it. 60 years, Drake said quietly. 60 years of watching. 60 years of building. 60 years of every scientist, every engineer, every soldier on this planet working toward one single question. What happens when they finally come for us? He looked at Dr. Halil. Now we have our answer. He turned to his command staff. Activate Protocol Prometheus. The words moved through the facility like electricity. Officers who had trained for this moment their entire lives suddenly found their hands shaking. Protocol Prometheus was not just a battle plan. It was the sum total of everything humanity had built in secret. Hidden fleets. Weapon systems powered by the sun itself. Billions of autonomous drones stored in hollowed-out asteroids. Sensor networks that stretched across the entire solar system. All of it sleeping. All of it waiting. Until now. Over the next hour, Drake gave orders that would quietly wake up the most dangerous military machine the galaxy had never seen. No alarms rang on the surface. No governments made announcements. The people of Earth continued their ordinary lives, unaware that their survival was being fought for in the silence beneath mountains. When the preparations were confirmed, Drake sat down and opened the communication channel. But he did not send the message to his own fleet. He sent it outward, into the dark, aimed directly at the approaching Dominion Harvester fleet. He used their own encrypted military frequency, the one they believed no other species could access. The message was short. Drake wrote it himself. Dr. Halil watched him type. You think this will stop them? Drake shook his head. No, it will not stop them. Nothing will stop them from coming. But when they get here, I want them to know something. What? That we were never afraid. He pressed send. The message traveled outward at the speed of light, slicing through the darkness between stars. It would reach the Harvester fleet in hours. It would reach the rest of the galaxy not long after. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same. Somewhere on Threx Prime, Scribe Leon sat alone in her small room, still staring at the file for species 4217. Something about it bothered her. Something deep in the old data, buried beneath layers of bureaucratic neglect. She kept digging, pulling up records that had not been opened in centuries. And then she found it. A single note from the original surveyor who had first visited Earth. It was marked with the highest possible danger classification, a level she had never seen used before. The note was short. Recommend permanent avoidance. Species exhibits anomalous aggression adaptation loop. Do not engage. Someone had overridden the warning 200 years ago. Someone had buried it. Leon stared at the words. Her four hands trembled. She tried to send a message to Fleet Commander Draxus, to warn him, to tell him that something was very wrong about this planet. The message was blocked. Authorization denied. By order of Grand Arbiter Vorath. She sat in the dark, her heart beating fast, and wondered what the humans were going to do to that fleet. The Dominion Harvester flagship Teeth of Obedience was a monster of metal and purpose. It stretched nearly 4 kilometers from bow to stern, covered in weapons that could crack the surface of a planet. Inside its command bridge, 200 officers worked in perfect, obedient silence. They had done this many times before. The conquest of a primitive world was not exciting. It was paperwork with explosions. Fleet Commander Draxus Moore stood at the center of the bridge with his thick arms folded behind his back. He was a reptilian creature with green-black scales, sharp teeth, and eyes the color of old blood. He had commanded 40 campaigns for the Dominion and had never lost. Not once. He did not intend to start with some backwater planet in the Outer Rim. The fleet had exited slipspace at a staging point 2 light years from the human system. 10,000 warships held position in the cold dark, running final checks before the jump to their target. It would be fast. It always was. 3 days at most. Probably less. "Commander," a voice called from the communications station. It was Signals Officer Talith, a young and nervous creature with large ears and pale skin. His species had been absorbed into the Dominion 4 centuries ago. He was good at his job, but right now his hands were shaking. Draxus turned his heavy head. "What is it?" "We are receiving a transmission, sir." "Directed at us. From Threx Prime?" "No, sir." Talith swallowed hard. "From the target system. From Earth." The bridge went quiet. Every officer stopped what they were doing. Draxus walked slowly toward the communication station. "That is not possible. They are a Class 2 civilization. They should not have the technology to detect us, much less send a targeted transmission." "I know, sir. But there is something worse." Talith looked up at his commander with wide, frightened eyes. "The transmission is on our encrypted military frequency, the one that has never been broken by any species, ever." Draxus stared at him for a long moment. Then he said, "Play it." Talith pressed the control. The bridge speakers crackled once, and then a voice filled the room. It was calm and clear, speaking in perfect Dominion common tongue. But it was not a Dominion voice. It was something else entirely. Something human. To the commanders of the Dominion Harvester Fleet designated for Sol 3. "We are aware of your mission, your fleet composition, your staging coordinates, and your rules of engagement. We have been aware for some time. This message is not a plea. It is not a negotiation. It is a courtesy. Do not come here. You will not be harvested. You will not be enslaved. You will simply cease to exist. This is your only warning. The Void Wardens of Earth." The message ended. Silence filled the bridge like water filling a sinking ship. One of the junior officers made a small sound that might have been fear. Draxus silenced it with a look. "A bluff," he said firmly. "A desperate species that somehow intercepted our communications and is trying to frighten us." He turned to his officers. "We proceed as planned. Increase combat readiness to full. We jump to Sol in 6 hours." No one argued. No one ever argued with Draxus. But the message was already doing its damage far beyond the flagship. 6,000 light years away, on Station Oran 4, a woman sat in a small room surrounded by alien equipment. Her name was Selim Marchetti, and officially she was a human trader dealing in rare minerals. Unofficially, she was Earth's secret ambassador to the galaxy. She had lived on this station for 11 years, learning alien languages, building quiet relationships, and planting seeds of doubt about the Dominion wherever she could. She had received the message from Admiral Drake 30 minutes before it was sent to the fleet. Along with it came a simple instruction: make sure the galaxy hears it. Marchetti was very good at her job. She had spent years placing small devices inside the station's communication systems. Tiny things, no bigger than grains of sand, hidden in relay nodes and signal boosters. Now she activated them. The message that was meant only for the Harvester fleet was copied, amplified, and broadcast across the open galactic communication network. Within an hour, it had reached hundreds of worlds. On the mining planet of Reth Prime, where stone-skinned giants had been enslaved for 800 years, Workers in the deep tunnels stopped and listened as the message played through hijacked speakers. A species had threatened the Dominion. Not begged, not pleaded, threatened. A massive worker named Corvin stood perfectly still as the words washed over him. He had led a secret resistance for 20 years, waiting for a sign that the Dominion was not unbeatable. Slowly, he closed his enormous fist. On the water world of Pelusis, where an aquatic species had been forced to harvest their own oceans for Dominion profit, the elders gathered in their deep halls and replayed the message 17 times. They had not heard defiance in 10 generations. On Station Orinfor itself, aliens of a dozen conquered species crowded around screens and speakers, listening to a human voice speak words that no one had dared to speak in living memory. Some were afraid. Some were angry. But underneath it all, like a fire catching in dry grass, was something else. Hope, small and fragile, but alive. The Dominion loyalists were furious. How dare some unknown species challenge the greatest power in the galaxy? It was absurd. It was an insult. It was dangerous, because if the Dominion did not crush Earth completely and publicly, other species might start getting ideas. On Threx Prime, Grand Arbiter Vorath was informed of the leaked message by a trembling aide. He listened to it once. Then he turned off the recording and sat in silence for exactly 10 seconds. "Amusing," he said. His voice was flat. "Grand Arbiter, the message has spread to at least 400 systems. The subject species are restless. Yes, they always become restless when they smell weakness." Vorath stood. "Which is why there will be no weakness. Commander Draxus will proceed. He will destroy the human fleet, burn their cities, and send their leaders to the processing camps. We will broadcast the fall of Earth on every channel in the Dominion. And this moment of false hope will be crushed." He dismissed the aide with a wave of his arm. The matter was settled. But Scribe Leon had not stopped digging. She had found the buried surveyor's report, the one marked with the highest danger classification. Now she searched for more, pulling files from archives that had not been opened in centuries. What she found made her blood run cold. The original survey team that had visited Earth had not simply studied the humans from orbit. They had landed. They had observed the species up close. And what they had documented was unlike anything in the Dominion's records. Humans did not simply endure threats. They adapted to them. Every war made their weapons better. Every plague made their medicine stronger. Every disaster made their societies more organized. It was not slow evolution over millions of years. It was fast, deliberate change within single generations. The surveyor had called it the aggression adaptation loop and had written in his final notes that humanity had the potential to become what the Dominion classified as an apex predator species. That classification had been used only twice in galactic history. Both times, the species had to be completely destroyed before they became too powerful to stop. Both times, it had cost the Dominion dearly. And someone had looked at this report and buried it. Someone had decided that the warning was not worth the trouble. Leon tried again to send a message to Commander Draxus. Again, it was blocked by Vorath's office. She sat alone in her archive room, surrounded by the ghosts of 1,000 conquered worlds, and felt the terrible certainty that the Dominion had just made the worst mistake in its long and bloody history. Far away, the Harvester fleet jumped toward Sol. 10,000 warships carrying 1,000,000 soldiers, all expecting an easy victory against a primitive world. They dropped out of slipspace at the edge of the human solar system. Draxus stood on his bridge and looked at the sensor readings. He expected to see crude defense platforms, maybe a few primitive warships, perhaps some nuclear missiles aimed at his fleet. He saw nothing. The system was empty. No ships, no stations. No defenses of any kind. Just planets, moons, asteroids, and silence. Draxus grinned. His sharp teeth caught the light. As expected. They had nothing. The message was a bluff. Begin standard approach. We take the third planet. His officers acknowledged the order. The fleet began to move inward. And then every sensor on every ship in the fleet screamed at once. The screaming of the sensors was not a malfunction. It was a warning. Every ship in the Harvester fleet was being scanned at the same time by something they could not see, could not locate, and could not stop. In seconds, the invisible scanners had mapped every ship in the fleet. Shield frequencies, weapon systems, engine types, crew numbers. Everything was read, recorded, and cataloged by a ghost. Commander Draxus gripped the railing of his bridge. Where is it coming from? Find the source. His sensor officers worked frantically, but their screens showed nothing. The system still appeared empty. Whatever was scanning them was completely invisible to Dominion technology. Deep beneath the Himalayan mountains on Earth, Admiral Soren Drake sat in the war room and watched the Dominion fleet on a holographic display. Every ship was tagged and identified. He knew their names, their commanders, their weapons, and their weaknesses. His Spectre grid, a network of thousands of cloaked sensor platforms spread across the entire solar system, had given him a perfect picture of the enemy. He studied the display calmly. His officers waited for his command. They are in the outer system, Drake asked. Yes, Admiral. Passing the orbit of Neptune. Standard conquest formation. They are moving toward Earth. Drake nodded slowly. Activate the cage. The order traveled at the speed of light to hidden installations scattered across the asteroid belt. Thousands of microsatellites, each no larger than a human fist, had been sleeping among the rocks for decades. Now they woke up. They powered on simultaneously and began emitting a resonance frequency that was specifically designed to disrupt one thing: Dominion slipspace drives. On the bridge of the Teeth of Obedience, a new alarm sounded. Commander, the navigation officer called out, his voice cracking. Slipspace drives are offline. All ships reporting the same failure. We cannot generate a slipspace window. Draxus turned sharply. What? Something is interfering with our drive systems. The interference is coming from everywhere. We cannot determine the source. The truth settled over Draxus like a cold hand on the back of his neck. They could not leave. The fleet that had come to conquer this system was now trapped inside it. He forced himself to stay calm. It does not matter. We have 10,000 warships. Whatever they have hidden in this system, we will crush it. All ships, battle formation. Move toward the third planet. Maximum speed. The fleet reformed and pushed inward. They moved past the gas giants and into the asteroid belt. That was when the second phase began. From the surfaces of moons, from inside hollowed asteroids, from orbital platforms hidden behind planets, launch doors opened by the thousands. What came out of them was not a fleet. It was a swarm. Billions of autonomous drones, each barely larger than a bird, poured into space like a dark river. They were fast, agile, and they had only one purpose: to blind the enemy. The drones did not attack the Dominion ships directly. They targeted sensors, communication arrays, navigation systems, and antenna clusters. They moved in coordinated waves, overwhelming the point defense guns that tried to shoot them down. For every drone destroyed, 10 more took its place. Within minutes, the Harvester fleet began to go dark. Ships lost contact with each other. Sensor screens filled with static. Navigation systems gave false readings. Commanders shouted orders into dead communication channels. The most powerful fleet the Dominion had sent to conquer a single world was suddenly flying blind in enemy space. Draxus watched his bridge screens die one by one. The organized, disciplined fleet he commanded was falling into chaos. Ships were drifting, unable to coordinate. Some were firing wildly at the drones, wasting ammunition on targets too small and too many to hit. "This is impossible," his weapons officer said quietly. "No Class 2 species could do this." "They are not Class 2, Draxus replied. His voice was hard, but something in his eyes had changed. It was the first crack of doubt he had felt in 40 campaigns. "They have not been Class 2 for a very long time." 2 billion kilometers away, in the cold darkness of the Kuiper Belt, Captain Yuki Tanaka sat in the command chair of the EWS Consequence. Her ship was a stealth dreadnought, the most advanced warship humanity had ever built. It was 300 meters long, covered in light-absorbing armor that made it invisible to every known sensor technology. It carried weapons that the Dominion had never seen and could not defend against. And it was not alone. Around it, hidden in the frozen rocks at the edge of the solar system, were 199 more ships just like it. They had been here for years, sleeping, waiting, hidden so perfectly that even the Dominion's entry scan had missed them completely. Tanaka watched the tactical display. The Dominion fleet was blinded and scattered. The drones had done their work perfectly. Her communication officer spoke. "Admiral Drake is on the line." Drake's voice came through, calm and steady. "Captain Tanaka, the enemy is in the box. You are authorized for Phase 3. Hit them." Tanaka looked at her bridge crew. These were men and women who had trained their entire lives for a battle they hoped would never come. Now it was here. "All ships," she said. "Decloak. Weapons free." 200 stealth dreadnoughts powered up their engines and dropped their cloaking fields at the same time. To the Dominion sensors that were still barely working, it looked like 200 stars had suddenly appeared in the outer system. Each one was moving toward the fleet at incredible speed. The human ships hit the Dominion fleet like a hammer hitting glass. Kinetic accelerator rounds, fired at a significant fraction of the speed of light, punched through Dominion armor like it was paper. Antimatter torpedoes detonated against shields that were already weakened by the drone attacks. Weapons that the Dominion had never encountered and had no defense against tore through their formations. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted less than 3 hours. The Dominion fleet had been built to overwhelm inferior opponents with superior numbers. It had never fought an enemy that was technologically superior, tactically prepared, and fighting in a system that had been turned into a weapon. The Harvester fleet was not defeated. It was taken apart, piece by piece, with a precision that was almost surgical. When it was over, 600 Dominion ships remained out of 10,000. They were damaged, scattered, and trying desperately to find a way out of the system. The cage was still active. They were still trapped. On the bridge of the Teeth of Obedience, Commander Draxus sat in his command chair, surrounded by fire and sparking consoles. Half his bridge crew was dead. His ship was crippled. The fleet he had commanded, the fleet that had never known defeat under his leadership, was gone. He managed to send one last transmission to Threx Prime through the wreckage of his communication system. His voice was flat and empty. They knew everything. They were ready. "We are lost. Do not send more ships. Do not come to this system. They are not what we thought they were." Admiral Drake received the transmission at the same time as Threx Prime. He studied it for a moment. Then he gave an order that surprised his own officers. "Drop the cage. Let the survivors leave." His tactical officer frowned. "Admiral, they will report back to the Dominion. They will tell them everything." "Yes," Drake said. "That is exactly the point." He opened the communication channel to the retreating Dominion ships. His voice was calm, measured, and carried the weight of a species that had just proven itself to the galaxy. "This is Admiral Soren Drake of the Void Wardens. You are free to leave. Go home. Tell your masters what happened here. Tell them that we were merciful today. Tell them not to make us be anything else." The 600 surviving ships limped out of the Sol system and into slipspace as fast as their damaged drives could carry them. Behind them, the wreckage of 9,400 warships drifted silently through the asteroid belt. Across the galaxy, the Watcher Network, a secret collective of enslaved species who monitored Dominion activities, had been recording everything. They had tapped into the fleet's own communication relays and captured the entire battle. Now they broadcast it to every world they could reach. Billions of beings on hundreds of planets watched Dominion warships burn. They watched the symbols of their oppression broken and scattered like toys. They watched a species they had never heard of stand alone against the most powerful military force in the galaxy and win without breaking a sweat. On Threx Prime, Grand Arbiter Vorath received the battle data in his private chamber. He watched the recordings in silence. He read the analysis from his war scientists 3 times. Then his hands began to tremble. It was not the defeat that frightened him. Defeats could be avenged. It was what the analysis showed. The humans had not used their full strength. The weapons they deployed, the tactics they used, the forces they committed, all of it represented perhaps 40% of their estimated total capability. They had fought 10,000 warships with one hand behind their back. They had not been trying to win a war. They had been sending a message. And the message was clear. This was only a taste. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 11,000 years. In all that time, it had never lost a fleet. It had never been publicly humiliated. It had never been afraid. Now it was all 3. On Threx Prime, the capital world of the Dominion, chaos had taken root like a disease. The council chambers that had once operated in cold, efficient silence were now filled with shouting voices. Political factions that had spent centuries pretending to agree were suddenly at each other's throats. Hardliners demanded blood. Moderates urged caution. And everyone, whether they admitted it or not, was scared. Grand Arbiter Vorath stood above it all, watching the chaos from his elevated platform. He had ruled the Dominion for 3,000 years. He had crushed rebellions, silenced dissent, and buried entire species in the dust of history. He was not about to let one small planet in the outer rim tear his empire apart. He raised one long arm and the chamber fell silent. "Enough," he said. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. "The humans surprised us. I acknowledge this. They used deception and preparation to destroy a single fleet. This is not a defeat. It is a lesson, and we will respond with the appropriate force." He turned to his military commanders. "Assemble the Grand Armada. Every warship, every carrier, every weapon platform in the Dominion. 200,000 ships. We will go to Earth not to conquer it, but to erase it. Every city, every structure, every living thing on that planet will be turned to ash. And the galaxy will watch." The chamber erupted in approval. The hardliners cheered. The moderates stayed silent. The order was given. But not everyone on Threx Prime was cheering. Councillor Metha was a moderate politician who had spent her career trying to reform the Dominion from within. She was a thin, pale creature with silver eyes and a mind sharp enough to see what others refused to look at. She watched Vorath's speech and saw something the cheering crowd did not: desperation. Vorath was not acting from strength. He was acting from fear. And fear made empires do foolish things. That night, Metha received an unexpected visitor. Scribe Leon came to her private quarters, trembling and carrying a data tablet that contained the buried surveyor's report on humanity. Leon placed the tablet on Metha's desk. "Read it," she said. "Read what the first surveyor found on Earth. Read what the Grand Arbiter buried." Mitha, read it. The aggression adaptation loop. The classification of humanity as a potential apex predator species. The warning to never engage them. The recommendation for permanent avoidance that had been overridden and forgotten. When she finished, Mitha sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. He knew, or he should have known. And he sent a fleet anyway. He is sending 200,000 ships now, Leon said. If the humans truly are what this report says, what will they do when the entire Dominion comes to their door? Mitha did not answer. She did not need to. They both knew. Far from Threx Prime, on Station Oran 4, Ambassador Salim Marchetti was done hiding. For 11 years she had pretended to be a traitor, building quiet connections and planting seeds of rebellion. Now the seeds had grown, and it was time to stop pretending. She called a meeting, not in secret rooms or hidden channels, but openly in the main trading hall of the station. Representatives from 14 conquered species came. Some were large, some were small, some breathed air, and some breathed liquid. All of them had one thing in common. They had been under the boot of the Dominion for centuries, and they had just watched that boot get kicked across the solar system. Marchetti stood before them and spoke plainly. I am not a traitor. I am an ambassador of Earth. My people have been watching the Dominion for 60 years. We know what they do to species like yours. We know about the harvests, the slave camps, the stripped worlds. And we chose to prepare instead of submit. The room was tense. A massive Vreth warrior named Korvan stood near the back, his stone-gray arms folded across his broad chest. His species had been enslaved for 800 years, forced to work in deep mines until their bodies broke. He had led an underground resistance for 2 decades, but it had always been small, always hiding, always waiting for something to change. What do you want from us? Korvan asked. His voice was deep as an earthquake. Nothing, Marchetti said. We did not fight the Dominion for you. We fought them because they came for us. But they are coming again. 200,000 ships this time. Earth cannot fight that alone. She paused and looked at every face in the room. We are not asking you to serve us. We are not asking you to obey us. We are asking you to fight for yourselves. And if you choose to fight, we will stand beside you. We will bleed beside you. That is our offer. The room was silent. These were species that had learned over centuries that standing up meant being crushed. Trust was not something that came easily to the conquered. Korvan was the first to speak. My people have waited 800 years for someone to prove that the Dominion can bleed. You have proven it. The Vreth will fight. One by one, others followed. The aquatic Peluchi, the winged Seraph, the crystalline Hori. Species that had been enemies under Dominion rule, that had been turned against each other by their masters, now agreed to stand together. It was not smooth. There were arguments, suspicions, and old hatreds that nearly broke the alliance before it began. But it held. Back on Earth, Dr. Halil's intelligence team had intercepted the plans for the Grand Armada. When the briefing reached Admiral Drake, he did not smile this time. 200,000 warships was a force that could burn entire star systems. Even with Earth's technology, even with the home advantage, the numbers were crushing. We need allies, Drake said simply. The technology we share with them does not need to be our best. It just needs to be better than what the Dominion gives their slaves. Earth began shipping weapons technology, shield generators, communication systems, and tactical training programs to the Alliance through hidden channels. Human military advisors traveled to secret bases on neutral worlds, teaching conquered species how to organize, how to fight, and most importantly, how to believe they could win. The Alliance grew. It was messy, fragile, and held together by nothing more than shared desperation and a thin thread of trust. But it grew. Then Counselor Mitha made her move. through a chain of intermediaries so long and complex that it could never be traced back to her. She sent a data package to Ambassador Marchetti. Inside was the complete deployment schedule of the Grand Armada, the routes, the timing, the supply chain, and the command structure. It was the single most valuable piece of intelligence in galactic history, and it came from the heart of the Dominion itself. When Admiral Drake received the data, he studied it for a full day without sleeping. Then he called a meeting of his senior commanders and the leaders of the allied species. The Armada launches in 20 rotations, he told them. 200,000 ships. They will come through Dominion space, gathering forces as they go. They expect to arrive at Sol and find us alone. He activated a holographic map that showed the Armada's route. Red dots stretched across the galaxy like a river of blood flowing toward Earth. But look at what they leave behind. He highlighted the Dominion's rear, the subjugated worlds, the supply stations, the lightly defended garrisons. They are pulling everything to the front. Everything. Their empire will be hollow behind them. Corvan understood immediately. We strike behind them. We cut their supply lines. We take back our worlds while their ships are far away. Drake nodded. The Dominion has spent 11,000 years building an empire on the backs of slaves. They forgot something important about slaves. What? Marchetti asked. That they outnumber their masters. The Grand Armada launched from Threx Prime 3 weeks later. 200,000 warships moved through space in a formation so vast that it blocked out the stars. Varath broadcast a galaxy-wide declaration from his council chamber. His voice was cold and final. The species known as humans, and any species that provides them aid, will be destroyed completely. There will be no conquest. There will be no integration. There will be extinction. This is the will of the Dominion. The galaxy heard him. And on 100 worlds, in secret rooms and hidden tunnels and deep underwater halls, the conquered species heard him too. They looked at each other. They gripped their new weapons. And they waited. As the Armada crossed through Dominion space, reports began arriving from the rear. Small at first. A garrison overrun on a mining world. A supply depot destroyed. Communication relays going dark. Then bigger. Entire planets declaring independence. Slave armies rising with weapons that were far better than anything they should have had. The Empire was burning from within. And at the edge of the Sol system, Admiral Drake stood before a combined fleet of 12,000 ships. Human dreadnoughts and allied warships of every shape and size. Crewed by species that had never fought together before, but were willing to die together now. He opened a channel that he knew the approaching Armada would intercept. His voice was steady. His words were simple. You should have stayed home. The Grand Armada of the Galactic Dominion dropped out of slipspace at the edge of the Sol system like a dark cloud swallowing the sky. 200,000 warships stretching across millions of kilometers of space, each one carrying enough firepower to level a continent. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, built for one single purpose, to erase humanity from existence. On the other side of the system, Admiral Soren Drake stood in his war room beneath the Himalayas and studied the enemy on his holographic display. The numbers were staggering. 200,000 against 12,000. The math said it was impossible. The math said Earth should surrender. Drake had never been very good at math. All stations report ready, his tactical officer said. Allied fleet is in position. The cage is fully charged. Drone reserves are at maximum capacity. Drake looked at the display one final time. Then he spoke to every ship in his fleet, human and alien alike. This is Admiral Drake. What comes toward us today is everything the Dominion has. Every ship, every weapon, every ounce of power they have built over 11,000 years of conquest. They believe that power makes them invincible. He paused. They are wrong. Power is not in the size of your fleet. It is in what you are willing to fight for. Today, we fight for every species they have ever crushed, every world they have ever burned, every voice they have ever silenced. Hold the line, and make them remember this day forever. The Battle of Seoul began. The Armada pushed into the system in a massive wave, expecting to overwhelm the defenders with sheer numbers. They hit the cage first. The resonance field activated across the asteroid belt, and thousands of Dominion ships lost their slipspace capability instantly. They were committed now. There was no quick retreat. The system-wide weapon platforms that had been sleeping among the asteroids woke up and opened fire, hammering the leading edge of the Armada with kinetic rounds and plasma bolts. The Dominion lost 3,000 ships before they even reached the inner system. But the Armada was vast, and it kept coming, absorbing the losses and pressing forward like a flood pushing through a wall. Phase 2 hit them next. The drone swarms launched again, but this time they were not alone. Allied species had contributed their own additions, Vreth magnetic disruptors that scrambled targeting systems, Palucci bioacid pods that ate through hull plating, Sereth lightbenders that created false sensor images. The swarm was larger, smarter, and more vicious than anything the Dominion had faced in the first battle. The Armada's formation began to fracture. Ships lost contact with their neighbors. Commanders issued conflicting orders. Entire battle groups drifted off course, chasing ghost signals while the real attacks came from behind. But the Dominion still had numbers. They adapted, pulling their ships into tighter formations, using overlapping shield coverage to protect against the drones. Slowly, painfully, they pushed through the swarm and toward the inner planets. Drake watched the tactical display. The enemy was bleeding, but they were still coming. It was time for the combined fleet to fight. 12,000 ships moved to meet 200,000. Human stealth dreadnoughts struck from unexpected angles, appearing and disappearing like shadows. Allied warships fought with a desperate courage that surprised even their human partners. These were species that had lived in chains for centuries. They had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Corvand led a squadron of Vreth warships, crude, heavy vessels that the stone-skinned warriors had built in secret over decades. They were not elegant or advanced. They were blunt instruments, and the Vreth used them like hammers. Corvand's flagship, a captured Dominion cruiser that his people had rebuilt with their own hands, charged directly into the heart of a Dominion battle group. Corvand, you are outnumbered in that sector. Captain Tanaka radioed from the consequence. Pull back and regroup. The Vreth do not pull back, Corvand replied. We have been pulling back for 800 years. Today we push forward. His ship slammed into a Dominion command carrier at full speed. The collision tore both ships apart, but it also disabled the carrier's command network, throwing the entire battle group into confusion. Corvand and most of his crew made it to the escape pods. Some did not. The sacrifice was not in vain. Human dreadnoughts swept through the disorganized battle group and destroyed it in minutes. Similar stories played out across the system. Palucci submersible ships, designed for their water world, were surprisingly effective in the three-dimensional combat of space. Sereth pilots, with their natural wings and incredible reflexes, flew fighter craft with a skill that left even human pilots in awe. Species that had never fought before, that had been told for centuries that they were weak and worthless, discovered that they were neither. But the Armada kept coming. The Dominion had not ruled the galaxy for 11,000 years by being easy to beat. Commander Draxus, given one final chance by Vareth to redeem himself, led the Armada's core fleet, 50,000 of the most powerful warships, in a direct push toward Earth. They broke through the defensive lines by sheer force and began their approach to the blue planet. Drake watched them come. His face was calm, but his officers could see the tension in his jaw. This was the moment everything depended on. "Authorized Protocol Prometheus," he said. "Full activation." Deep inside the sun, something stirred. For 30 years, Earth scientists had been building devices that reached into the star itself and drew energy directly from its core. Stellar energy taps buried beneath the surface of the sun, connected to a network of relay stations that stretched across the inner system. This network fed into the Soulfire Array, a weapon system of a scale that no species in the galaxy had ever imagined, because no species had ever been bold enough or desperate enough to try to weaponize a star. The array activated. The relay stations aligned. And from the heart of the sun, concentrated beams of solar plasma, each one carrying the temperature of a stellar core, lanced outward across the system. The effect was immediate and devastating. Entire Dominion formations vanished. Ships that had survived the drones, the weapons platforms, and a combined fleet were erased in instants by beams of pure star fire. Shield technology meant nothing. Armor meant nothing. The Soulfire Array did not damage ships. It turned them into gas. Draxus saw the beams cutting through his fleet and understood, finally and completely, that the humans had been holding back all along. Everything before this, the drones, the stealth ships, the cage, had been the opening moves. This was the real weapon. This was what Protocol Prometheus had always been about. He did not run. He pushed his damaged flagship forward, determined to reach Earth, to strike at least one blow against the species that had humiliated the Dominion. Captain Tanaka's Consequence moved to intercept him above Mars. The two ships fought a brutal, close-range duel among the red planet's thin atmosphere. They traded fire until both were burning, venting atmosphere, and falling apart. Tanaka ordered her crew to evacuate. Draxus did not. As his ship broke apart around him, the old reptilian warrior looked at the blue planet hanging in the distance and said quietly, to no one, they deserved their freedom. Both ships were destroyed. Tanaka and most of her crew were recovered from escape pods hours later. Draxus was not. The Armada broke. The will to fight drained out of the Dominion fleet like blood from a wound. Ships began surrendering, powering down their weapons and broadcasting distress signals. Others turned and ran, jumping to slipspace the moment they cleared the cage's range. The Grand Armada, the greatest military force in galactic history, scattered like dust in a storm. Varath watched from Threx Prime through a real-time relay. He saw his empire's entire military shattered against a single world. He saw the reports flooding in from behind the lines, world after world breaking free. Slave armies overwhelming their masters. Dominion flags being torn down and burned on planets that had lived in darkness for centuries. He sat alone in his council chamber as the lights went out around him, one by one. The power grid was failing. The people of Threx Prime were in the streets. His guards had abandoned their posts. The door to his chamber opened. He expected soldiers. He expected assassins. It was Scribe Leon, small, quiet, four-armed Leon, who had tried to warn him. Who had been ignored? Who had been silenced? She stood in the doorway and looked at the most powerful being in the galaxy, now sitting alone in the dark. "You were warned," she said. That was all. She turned and walked away. The Dominion fell in days. Not because it was conquered, but because it had been hollow for centuries, held together by fear alone. And when the fear was broken, there was nothing left. Earth did not claim the galaxy. Admiral Drake addressed the newly formed Free Systems Accord, a coalition of every species that had fought for its freedom, and said words that would be remembered for 10,000 years. "We are not your rulers. We are not your saviors. We are your neighbors. and we will be here if you need us. The galaxy began to heal. It would take generations. Old wounds between species ran deep, and the scars of 11,000 years of oppression would not fade quickly. But for the first time in living memory, the future was not written by conquerors. Dr. Ayman Halil retired to a small house in the mountains. He kept one thing on his desk, a framed copy of the original message that Earth had sent to the Harvester fleet. Sometimes, in the quiet evenings, he would read it and smile. Ambassador Marchetti moved to Station Orn 4 permanently. She became Earth's first official galactic ambassador and spent the rest of her life building bridges between species that had forgotten how to trust. Corvan returned to Vreth Prime, free for the first time in 800 years. He stood on the surface of his world, feeling the wind on his stone skin, and planted a flag. Not a flag of conquest or empire. A simple marker with simple words. We remember. We endure. We are free. And on a small blue planet circling an ordinary yellow star, 7 billion people looked up at the sky and saw something new in the darkness between the stars. Not enemies. Not masters. Not threats. Neighbors. The galaxy had believed for 11,000 years that power meant dominion, that the strong ruled and the weak obeyed, that this was the natural order of things and could never be changed. But the humans taught them a different lesson. Power was not the fist that struck. It was the hand that refused to kneel. And Earth, small and blue and unbelievably stubborn, had never learned how to kneel.